All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Tuesday. We had I thought it was a great program yesterday with Arlen. I know he was very pleased as well. We thought it was interesting, entertaining, a lot to talk about. So pat on the back from ourselves to ourselves. If you got a chance to check it out, hope you will let us know what you thought as well. By the way, phone number here, 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you about the topics du jour, or really anything that strikes your fancy that is in the news that you think is worth discussing right here on Halitics. Don't forget, click like, click subscribe. That button is in the bottom right of your screen, the subscribe now button. So that's your opportunity to be notified of everything that I do on Halitics and help our subscriber base just jump a little bit. So just a couple little things you can do. Also, hope you'll join Halitics on Facebook. We'll get you the little subscribe now button and all that nice stuff there. There's your subscribe now. And we do have the Facebook group as well. I just mentioned Halitics, which I think is a really nice resource because it gives you an opportunity to have back and forth discussion, dialogue, besides just calling Halitics. And finally, click like if you get a chance. All right, so I don't know how long today's program will be. We'll see if we go the full hour. Usually I do. I don't really have any trouble filling it up, but I kind of was haphazard this morning, looking at a lot of different stories, trying to figure out what was the best way to connect them thematically. And I kind of thought, well, and not that we don't delve into this all the time. So, I don't want to overdo it or all that stuff. But, I guess the question really is, how do we categorize Trump? And I said, he kind of defies it, right? He's not, and Arlen and I discussed this yesterday. For example, he isn't really, right? He's not in isolation. When it comes to foreign policy, it's really tough. He's not an isolationist. He's certainly not a warmonger. He's not a hawk. He's not a neocon. He seems certainly more pro-peace than other presidents we've had, but he has bellicose language as well. So he's kind of weird that way. He's different. So I put the little, checklist or what have you, the SAT multiple guess type questionnaire, and I crossed out Nazi. Some people call Trump a Nazi. I just don't think he fits that definition at all. I'm going to get into it in a little bit why I don't think he's Hitler. I even thought about having the thumbnail or YouTube thumbnail which shows Trump's picture on the left. By the way, that's a horrible picture. He really looks he looks truly malevolent in that image. And a lot of people view him as malevolent, and I can understand why. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, a former government employee, no longer with the government, but has a lot of friends in the federal government, and they're very afraid, and they are seeing the massacres, right? The job just being wiped out. I think there were reports today that folks who were offered buyouts and who accepted the buyouts were offered by federal government employees who were offered buyouts, accepted the buyouts, and then were told, no, you're just fired, forget it, you're not getting a buyout, you get maybe like 1 month's severance or something of that nature. I really don't even know how that works, and sometimes those stories are a bit apocryphal. I did work for the DC government for about 10 years, but I left on my own accord, so it wasn't like there was some kind of termination situation whatsoever. I just went to another job. So I really don't know how that necessarily works, but I know there's a lot of concerns, and a lot of government contractors are losing some of their business as a result because the federal government is cutting back. So this is causing significant havoc in the DC area. Now, I don't expect poor, struggling, working class Americans, folks in the private sector, I doubt they have a lot of sympathy for government workers, to be perfectly honest with you. And I can understand to a degree why they wouldn't. The feeling, I think, among many blue-collar Americans and white-collar too is, I'm not really getting a lot of help from the federal government. There's not a lot of ways that it really provides a positive impact in my life. And those government workers, the lawyers, the functionaries, they have it better than I do. Many of them are represented by unions. I think government employees are more there's higher union density in government than there is in the private sector. And so I think there is resentment, and I can understand that. But these are human beings. They're also being victimized, right? They're losing out. They're going to suffer. Their families are going to suffer. This is not a good situation. And that's how the Democrats need to present it. They need to present as an opposition. Hey, these people are going to be hurt. The federal government, Trump has no plans for these people whatsoever. They're just being cut adrift. And even more importantly, what the Democrats have to do is make a strong case tying the work that the laid off, discharged, terminated federal government employees are doing, connect that to the ways that they are making life a little bit better for the average American. Now, if they can't make that case, then they've got to come back with, we've done a bad job. We have built this government edifice, and when we've been in charge, we haven't run it in a way that makes life better for the American people, and we're going to do better. But that's how you win. That's how you win. You make a case for why what you're going to do, what you have done, if you can make it. It's tough for the Democrats to make a case that the work they've done for the American public over the past 25 years has made things better. It's not an obvious or easy case. The biggest, I guess, accomplishment in quotes by the Democrats since the new millennium began in 2001, their biggest accomplishment, I guess, would be the Affordable Care Act. And yes, there have been some benefits, but the average American, I don't think, has benefited much from the Affordable Care Act. Healthcare costs continue to rise, out-of-pocket costs continue to go up, and many folks actually were reduced to part-time work so that their employer wouldn't have to cover them in terms of health care. So that's not an easy case for the Democratic Party to make. They need to come back with either a strong argument for how they have made life better for the American public, which I don't think they can make, or acknowledge significant shortcomings and present a brief why they in the future would be much better for people than Trump. And it's not going to be easy for them to do because they bollocksed everything up so badly. The question, though, right on your screen there, what is Trump? I don't think he's a Nazi. I'll get into that. Why is he a fascist? There are certainly elements of fascism to Trump, the kind of the cult of personality, the disregard for the laws of the land, just firing people willy-nilly, no concern for their protection. I think right-wing populists may fit a little bit better. That's why I put the exclamation points after that, or exclamation point. I think right-wing populists are a little better. Certainly the tariffs, for example, reflect that. The call to focus on domestic priorities, not overseas. That's a populist type message. Absolutely. So I think he does fit into that. But ultimately, I'm going with sui generis. I mean, I don't think we've seen anyone quite like Trump. His mix of message really doesn't, it's not consistent with any politician I can really think of, except maybe now some right-wing populists, like someone like an Orban or someone in Hungary or others in Europe who are sort of saying, let's pull our, let's hunker down within our borders and try to build up a strong domestic country without worrying too much about what's happening in other lands. But Trump doesn't fit neatly into that. So yeah, sui generis. If you have thoughts, 240-242-5646. In a way, it doesn't really matter that much. You deal with what you have. By the way, hey Ari, good to see you there in the chat. You deal with what you have, so but knowing who are the comps, right? Who are good analogies can help you decide how to respond, right, to a particular individual or a particular dynamic. Using a chess analogy, and I've talked about this before, I'm so bad at chess, I hate it, I'm so bad, and that's something I'm addicted to. Fortunately, that doesn't cost me anything, right? I don't have to pay to play, and I don't bet on it or anything like that, so I don't lose any money, but except for my time and my self-esteem, because I'm just so bad, I make the same mistakes over and over and over again. But, if you're good at chess, if you're able to come up with smart strategies, you see mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, you play somebody and you see those particular combinations that they have, that they've used over the board, and if you see them, you recognize them, then you can respond and you can defeat them or somebody who plays similarly. And again, if you have a particular politician and they followed a specific blue template that others have followed in the past, then you maybe know how to respond. I would say there is a way to respond, and it's the clear way is you look at how FDR, built a Democratic majority that lasted 30, 40, 50 years, at least when it comes to the House of Representatives. How did you do that? You make life better for poor Australian working people. You address their needs. You address the problems that they face. And you take on the billionaire class, which is exactly what FDR did. They had a 90+% top marginal tax rate in 1935, 1936. So the Democrats had the gumption, if they had the willingness, the ability to stand up to their corporate benefactors, they could win. They don't, so we have to go to a different playbook, since the Democrats can't, won't, aren't capable of fighting for us. We have to find someone who will, some group that will, some organization that will. And clearly, I don't think how could there be any doubt that is not the Democratic Party. I guess neolibs, neocons, people who don't like Trump, but at the same time are absolutely loath to abandon the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party pretty much follows the playbook that they want. Their response to Trump is to demonize him, attack him, insult him, and insult his followers, mock them. And that is not going to win you elections. That is, and as far as the elites are concerned, that's fine. We're good. We are okay losing to a Trump, as long as they may not be so good losing to a Trump, because Trump is now plotting to cut the military budget in half. That's what he says. If he does that, that's going to hurt some billionaires. That really is. And what if he really does continue his slash and burn policy through the federal government, cutting U.S. aid, for example? Those the budget, the federal government budget, has an awful lot of feather nesting in there, an awful lot of sweetheart deals and sweetheart contracts. So even that isn't going to necessarily be what the elites want. So they may not be thrilled with Trump. That's kind of what this argument, the Atlantic, seems to be suggesting, that, comparing Trump to Hitler back in 1933. And I thought about having that as my thumbnail, right? That Trump and then a does not equal and then a picture of Hitler. But I just thought I can't use Hitler as a as a promotional image, right? I won't do that. So I just decided not to. But the Atlantic is, I think, and certainly there on Facebook, on social media, the people who read this sponsored ad view this Atlantic thumbnail as drawing a direct comparison between Hitler and Trump. And so they note that Trump got a lot of support from the elites in German society, the financial elites, the industrial elites, they embraced him as a bulwark against the pro-union social democrats and the virulently anti-capitalist communists. But in the end, they paid a very heavy price for that, as Germany was laid to waste by Hitler militarism. And that's all true. I mean, there's no question. But I don't think it's a good comparison. I don't see that at all, for a lot of reasons. One is it's not completely out. Completely. There's some similarities, I suppose, but no. For one thing, well, let me just show you before we get to why I reject the analogy. Online, there was quite a dispute, quite a debate, and I think you make a big mistake. If you really want to defeat Trumpism, as people are calling it, if you want to defeat that kind of right-wing demagoguery, because a lot of the policies are really bad for America. They hurt our country. We lose a lot of what's really good and important in our country, taking care of our neighbors, making sure all have enough, which we don't do now. And that's why Trump's in power. But you need a government. But you need a good government, one that works for the people, not that's corrupt. And Trump is probably looking, and I heard what I heard on the gray zone today is that really what they're doing, they're destroying agencies like U.S. Aid, which you could argue has done a lot of harm. They're taking on this propaganda unit. I forget exactly. They all do all this overseas broadcasting. And, those are kind of lower hanging fruit in some ways. Progressives could look at those and say, well, these aren't really bad. But they're also planning to slash Medicare by, hundreds of millions of dollars. That's terrible. There's going to be an awful lot of suffering as a result. I don't think calling Trump Hitler, calling his followers deluded, is helpful. I don't think it moves us forward. I don't think it helps get us to a better place. I think it only is alienating. And you can see that that's exactly how this Atlantic article, functioned. It split people apart. So one criticism by one poster is, love the ways you're implying that our current situation mirrors the Germany of the 30s. Bit of a stretch, nice try. So they're saying that's not true. And I even gave you 133 likes. So this was a very popular post. A lot of people agreed and said, no, our current situation isn't like Germany of the 30s. And then someone else writes, bit of a stretch. We're right on track to repeating what Germany did. But while many people disagreed, just as many, or perhaps even more, agreed that there was a real good analogy between Hitler and Trump. So this poster writes, there's a lesson here for our current administration, but the lessons of history are never learned, only repeated. So the point being, yeah, we are repeating the 1930s German experience, and 175 people agreed with that. You can see the thumb on the bottom right. So this piece functions very well to divide us, split us up, get into an argument over whether Trump really is Hitler, whether what Trump is trying to do is comparable to the Nazi Party. And again, I don't see it, but that doesn't mean I think it's okay. I just don't think that's a good analogy. And one of the big reasons I don't, not the only one, but the criticism that the Atlantic points out that there was genuine opposition to Hitler from a party that they call pro-union. I don't know how pro-union the Social Democrats really were. And there was also a very strong, at the time, Communist Party, which at many points I think was the second largest party in Germany after the Social Democrats and before the Nazis became the second biggest party after the Social Democrats. There was also the Christian Democrats. So there's a lot of different parties. But the point is, in Germany in the early 30s, voters had some decent alternatives. But in U.S. in 2024, we didn't really, the only good alternative we had was the Green Party, and they weren't viable. At least they weren't perceived as viable, and as a result weren't. So in that regard, the election is very different from what Germany experienced in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. Very different. In that election, German voters, the German electorate, actually had some apparently pretty decent choices. And if they didn't, those who didn't exercise those choices, who instead said, no, we're going to vote for the overtly nationalist, the overtly Jew-hating, the overtly anti-union Nazi party, if those you voted for them, it would be pretty fair to criticize that choice. It was a terrible, terrible decision. You chose bad, really, really bad, versus pretty good. But that's not the situation that most Americans perceived themselves as facing in 2024. Instead, there were two viable choices. I mean, I rejected that particular, structure. But most of you probably felt, yeah, it was either Trump or it was Kamala. I was talking to somebody again about that, and they were like, well, I voted for Kamala because Trump is so bad. Trump is not a Christian. Trump doesn't care about others. Trump is a narcissist. And I'm not going to argue with those points. But my argument instead is, yeah, Trump was bad, but the alternative, as you formulate, was also really bad and arguably just as bad. So that makes Trump different from Hitler, because Hitler destroyed some pretty darn good parties, or at least apparently parties with some pretty good policy prescriptions. But even there, that doesn't mean Trump isn't Hitler. If Trump were an overt racist Jew hater who proposed genocide, who put all the problems of the United States on one particular minority group, who was a militarist of the first order, then you could say, yeah, there's comps there. But is he? So my response, though, was, yeah, we have neither a pro-union nor anti-capitalist viable opposition party, and the result is it is incumbent upon us to build one, right? So we can vote for and we can appeal to folks who recognize, yeah, there are two bad alternatives, two bad options. It's also important to note that while Trump clearly does have fascist inclinations, he is not Hitler. And here's the specific reasons why not. He is not hell-bent on world domination, clearly. Instead, he's pushing, and so that's a big difference, right? Because Trump was all about militarism. We have to get rid of the Versailles Treaty. Trump had been a soldier in World War I. Hitler was a soldier, a decorated soldier. Trump's never been a soldier, and he doesn't show, nor is he a chicken hawk. He's never been war hawkish in the least. He's in fact, he was pro-peace, anti-Iraq war long before pretty much any Democrat, for example, except for Bernie, who isn't even a Democrat. So that's an enormous difference from Hitler. An enormous difference is that Trump is not a militarist. Trump viewed Russia. Hitler viewed Russia, and you can read it in his book, his ranting. He viewed Russia as filled with these kind of inferior people that Germany needed to kind of clear out, have Lebensraum. Now, if you want to draw a better analogy to Hitler, obviously Israel is the much better analogy. The Palestinian people are Untermenschen. If you use Hitler rhetoric, Hitler language, they need to be cleared out. We need to clear Gaza out. We need to clear out the West Bank, and then we can settle in those regions. So that's very much reminiscent of the Nazis. Trump has no apparently animus towards Russia. In fact, just the opposite. He's often been accused of being pro-Russia or a Russian asset. He's trying to make peace with Russia. That's very different, obviously, from Hitler, who ultimately saw Russia as Germany's enemy. And again, the massive cuts. And also, I can't stand the xenophobia, the scapegoating immigrants. So that you could say there's a comparison there. That's why it's not a complete absurd comp. But it's not ever based on race, right? I mean, Trump gets a lot of support from Latinos. He has surrounded himself with people from different minority groups. If you want to say, the Nazism was characterized, I think, by several things. It was characterized first and foremost by Jew hatred. Trump doesn't hate Jews at all. In fact, Trump has high Jews high in his cabinet, for example. His grandkids are Jewish. So that doesn't fly, right? He's clearly not a Jew hater. He doesn't seem to have any focus on any kind of racial superiority at all. Don't see that in him anyway. He does scapegoat immigrants, which I find abhorrent. He's not concerned with human rights in particular. That's abhorrent. It's not the same. There aren't even if you want to say separating families, it's cruel. It's cruel, but these aren't concentration camps in the way that the Nazis had them. And Obama was separating families as well. I'm not going to say it's exactly the same, but other presidents have done similarly bad things. Trump, torture Dick, I think, is more of a Nazi, right, than anything we've seen in the Trump administration. This is not to make excuses for Trump. I'm not doing that. I'm saying this is not a good comp. Let's back away from the Trump is Hitler analogies. It's the money problems. It's big money. Yeah, no, Ari, no question. It's the corruption of both parties. And that's why we are where we are right now, which is in such a terrible, terrible, terrible place. Here's, I'm just sort of going around because I don't like to be exactly in the position of defending Trump. It's more saying, hey, a pox on both parties. They're both awful. Trump isn't so much worse, so much different, so qualitatively worse than the Democrats that you somehow can justify voting for the Democrats because you have to stop Trump. Now, you can make the argument you had to vote for, the social, whatever, the Christian Democrats or whatever, the alternative party that had the best chance to defeat Hitler because Hitler was that bad. So I don't always reject the lesser of two evil argument. I reject it in this case because I don't think the Democrats are that much less evil. That's the problem. It's not just that it's not that Trump isn't evil. It's that they're not less evil. And if they're not less evil, there seems to be no argument whatsoever for embracing the Democrats. Now, here's a story I thought was very interesting. I think, again, kind of points out why I'm not of the mindset that the Democrats are so significantly superior. This is a terrible thing that Trump's doing, right? I mean, it seems absolutely clear. Eric Adams is absolutely corrupt. Eric Adams has taken bribes from foreign governments. He took a lot of money, and then he apparently got some sweetheart deal with, I don't even know which country was it, Turkey maybe, I think. Took money from the Turkish government, then had some, special dealings with Turkey. There's all manner of different bad behavior by Mayor Adams in New York. And the Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutor there, put together a really strong case. And the U.S. Attorney's Office is like, yeah, we got to go after this guy. This guy's a bad guy. And Trump's saying, no, I like Adams. He's been an ally of mine. And he says he'll deport immigrants, which is what I want. So we're going to drop the case. And not only that, they forced two prosecutors in the office to sign off on it under threat of being fired if they didn't, or there would be, massive layoffs in that office if they couldn't get two veteran prosecutors or two prosecutors to say, no, we're not going to proceed against Mayor Adams. So this is just absolute corruption of the worst sort. It's the decision not to prosecute Adams by the federal government was based on favoritism, not on a sober analysis of the facts that concluded it wasn't worth their time or it wasn't a strong case. No, it's a strong case. Adams is a crook. It's not even really, it's kind of weird because it's not even hyper partisan since Adams is a Democrat. This is the worst kind of corrupt government we've seen. And Trump's presiding over it. Trump's Justice Department is presiding over it. So I make that case. You'd say, well, Hal, if that's how you feel, why are you not saying, okay, you got to vote for Democrats. You got to support the Democrat Party. You've got to go after Trump. And here's why. Because this case could still go forward. I want to see, is Kathy Hochul going to pick it up? Is the Democratic Party elites in New York State or New York City, for that matter, who have absolutely, they could pick it up. I looked this up because I was like thinking, well, wait, everyone's so gung-ho against Trump, and rightly so, right? Against the Trump Justice Department, and rightly so. Who is it? It's that Pam Bondi. By the way, I will make a point here. If Matt Gaetz had been confirmed, remember Democrats drummed him out, and I had said they should support Matt Gaetz. There are a lot of reasons to support. Matt Gaetz seems pretty clearly against corruption in prosecutions, and there were some other areas too. He acknowledged the reality of the climate crisis, which is important in the Justice Department because they prosecute climate criminals. So I made the point. I thought also Gaetz, pretty pro-peace guy. Not sure how relevant that is for the Justice Department, but still, I'd rather have a pro-peace prosecutor than a pro-war one. So I made the case months ago. The Democrats are making a terrible mistake. They're being hyper-partisan going after Matt Gaetz. They should support Matt Gaetz. And if they had, then it might well be, we don't know. I have no, crystal ball reading, but I have a sense based on their histories. Pam Bondi was always a Trump prosecutor. She was always there for Trump. She always supported Trump in Florida. Maybe Gaetz would have been a little better. Maybe. But even so, the case against Eric Adams does not depend just on the Justice Department. The Manhattan DA, he's elected, by the way. Alvin Bragg is elected to be the district attorney there. He has his own political base. He could prosecute Mayor Adams. The New York Attorney General could prosecute Eric Adams. The Democratic governor could remove the mayor. Apparently, I did not know she had that power, but apparently she could. So let's see if if Eric Adams is that bad, and he is, if he's that corrupt, and he is, then are the Democrats going to step up? If they don't, I don't see how they have much of an argument to get rid of him. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646. By the way, I'm glad I got the call yesterday when Ari called because I forgot to do something I should be doing, which is testing my ringer. And so I have to see it. If I forget to test it, well, then, I won't know if it rings unless I'm looking at the phone. And there it is. You may hear that. I don't know if you do or not because I got it kind of low. So I wanted to get into a couple of other stories I thought were very interesting. I am very disheartened in a lot of ways. I don't see any real opposition either to Trump or, more importantly, in my view, to corporate elite rule, corporate elite governance. Regardless, it doesn't matter whether it's Biden presidency or Trump presidency. In some ways, it was worse under Biden. In some ways, it's worse under Trump. There doesn't seem to be any coalescing of pro-people, pro-environment, pro-life, anti-war people. And I find that incredibly disheartening. Folks in my neck of the woods are looking to Jamie Raskin to lead some opposition, conveniently forgetting, ignoring, or simply unaware and unwilling to be aware of the fact that his prosecution of the Trump impeachment in 21 actually helped Trump and actually hurt the American public. And I've been over that, so I don't really want to get into it again. It was just a distraction. It provided cover for the failures of the Democratic Party to enact truly pro-worker legislation. So that's what that was the function that Raskin's prosecution of Trump served. It also made Trump much more popular, and it allowed the myth that Trump was some kind of a victim, or at least fed into that the reality that Democrats had gone after Trump based on a bogus claim, Russiagate. So Raskin hurt the progressive cause. He may have helped as he saw his ability, probably did help him personally rise in the party, made him more popular, raised his profile. But in terms of bringing us to a better place, no, to just the opposite. I'm really about strategy. I'm really about let's think. What's the right way to respond to Trump? How can we make things better? How can we prevent more harm by Trump? Can't beat something with nothing, but you also aren't going to beat Trumpism with wokeism. So that brings me to a couple of quick stories here. This was interesting. I've become very involved in a couple of pro-peace groups. One is Code Pink. I talk a lot about Code Pink. I talk less about the Jewish Voice for Peace, but I also am a big believer in this organization, Jewish Voice for Peace. And I particularly like how they fight very, very hard against the anti-BDS movement. The BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. And I believe we should certainly have sanctions. I'm about the boycotting and divestment sanctions. Yeah, definitely sanctions, and divestment as well. I think it should be as a matter of law that we should be no longer providing support for Israel. And JVP is a big proponent of that strategy. So I appreciate Jewish Voice for Peace. And they're having a meeting tomorrow. So I try to get involved and go to these events as much as I can. I'll be at one in Seattle this weekend. The meeting tomorrow is on Zoom. So I registered for it. And I went through the registration. I'm just going to show you it. Your name, your email address, they send you a link to the Zoom link. So you have to register to get the link, which I think makes sense. They don't want to just give it to anybody because you get some trolls or someone like that who's bent on doing harm. But when I went through it, I found this question. And, I would love, used to have this guy on this program I don't want to say his name, but they were a much bigger proponent of the woke stuff than I am. And we debated whether there should be trans girls and women competing in sports events with bio girls and women. And that was, although they use the term cis, I'm not going to use the term cis, I use the term bio. It's what you are, and I understand, yes, there's a bit of a spectrum. And even I probably have some XX chromosomal makeup. Some of my chromosomes may be XX. I get that. But you have to draw a line somewhere. And the way I draw that line is, are you able to father a child or mother a child? And obviously there's even there some wiggliness, the lines aren't absolutely black and white, but they're pretty close. They're pretty darn close. The great majority, 99% of us, do fall pretty darn neatly into either male or female categories with some exceptions, with some, so I say with that 1% that may be an exception. Love to get into this. Do you really need to ask for a Zoom meeting? Why would you ask for pronouns? It seems to me this is just a way to make your group look non-serious. And we talked about how Trump looks like a buffoon insisting on renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's absurd that you would do that. But why do you ask for pronouns? If the argument is, well, we want everyone to feel comfortable. Okay. So if somebody appears to be, they're androgynous or they have a more masculine appearance, but they prefer she or whatever, what's the reason you need to know that? Or why would you even find a benefit knowing that on a Zoom call? When you do a Zoom call, you identify yourself, right? So if I join a Zoom call, I actually it's already in there, it says Hal Ginsberg. And there's it doesn't say Mr. Hal Ginsberg or he, but if you want to put that in, go ahead, fine, right? Whatever. But why does the group and why am I making a big deal about this? Because you're turning people off. Because there are people who say, we can't stand what Israel's doing. We hate the genocide. We want to know more about how Israel's using children as human shields. Or how Israel takes some 80-year-old man and makes him, and this is a story that came out, how Israel takes some 80-year-old man and makes him go out in a minefield. And then after he walks through the minefield and doesn't get blown up, they kill him. So those kind of stories horrify people. And JVP is absolutely right to center those. And JVP is absolutely right to say there should be no Maryland Israeli Development Center. But when you put this question in your registration form for a Zoom meeting, you reduce the number of people who are going to welcome your message, who are going to be listening to your message, who are going to care about your message. Now, I would love to hear from somebody who feels differently. I really would. I want to hear the argument for putting that question in there. I think the best you could come up with, I don't want to argue with myself, but if I have to, I will for briefly, 240-242-5646. I think the best argument for including the pronoun question for a Zoom meeting is it shows that we welcome trans and non-binary people. And I hear that. I mean, of course I hear it, but I don't understand why. Why does that make you more welcoming? Why would a non-binary or trans person care when they're on a Zoom call to let people on the call know their pronouns? Or they could do it themselves. Why, when they register? Isn't that kind of like a personal question that's totally unnecessary to ask for registration purposes? I'm just dying to learn. And I'm going to I'll ask maybe. I'll put that in my question. Say, why did you ask for pronouns? It's fine if people want to give it, I guess. I mean, that's up to them. You want to share your pronouns, share your pronouns. But for the group to ask, and it's very disappointing because I love JVP, but you limit your reach, you limit your ability to appeal to folks when you do that. All right. Here's another example of kind of, I don't know if I want to even call it wokeism gone wild. Maybe it is. It's kind of the same thing. It's where you're accommodating a particular group because they claim victim status. Now, do I think trans people are victims? I hate to say that you're a victim, but yes, there's discrimination against trans people. They do suffer as a result. I don't know this for a fact. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would be very surprised if indeed there aren't more assaults suffered by trans people than by other people. There's transphobia. There's no question about it. So here's something from my alma mater. I brought this up yesterday. I brought up this letter yesterday with Arlen, but I didn't go through it. I read this, and so there's the letter, right? And this was in the letter. And this just so turned me off. This just so pissed me off. This I did not share yesterday. This was about, how they're complaining about at Wesleyan, how they're beefing about this new Trump, the new orders, executive orders that you can't, I guess you can't provide, you can't be focused on diversity, and you can't discuss the hardships that certain groups have faced. And so here it is, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity was is the federal mantra, right? That it's all merit-based. But the letter writer wanted to be very clear. We will not tolerate anti-Muslim actions on our campus, which I'm glad, nor any other discrimination against groups based on religion. That's good. But then I highlighted this. We recognize that anti-Semitic incidents have surged in this country and around the world. And I wrote back, how? What's your evidence? What's your source? Because I think that's a load of crap. I've read this. I know that the group primarily responsible for this claim, the ADL, has no credibility. Wikipedia no longer considers them a credible source. That they conflate invariably criticism of Israel, that's the ADL, says if you criticize Israel, then you're anti-Semitic. Well, obviously that's a load of crap. It's not true. We know that there were riots, violence in the streets of Amsterdam last year at a soccer match involving an Israeli team. And that was widely cited. I think the New York Times or The Guardian used the term Jew. There was a Jew hunt in Amsterdam. And when it was investigated, that was just a load of crap. There was no Jew hunt. The Maccabiah fans started the violence. They initiated it. And then there were responses, and there were aggressive attacks on some of the fans of that soccer team. And some of those attacks were unjustified, just as the attacks by the Maccabiah fans were unjustified. But to claim that this is evidence of anti-Semitism just fails. It just fails. So where is the data that the unimpeachable, the credible data? Because I haven't seen it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it exists. Yeah, I bet there are some people who are really mad at Jews and at Israel for what Israel is doing. And if that's happening, Israel's to blame for that. Because Israel says we're the Jewish state. Israel says, if you don't support Israel, then you're not Jewish. And yes, some people believe it. I'm not going to say that those folks who get angry call and wrongly, because I'm Jewish, but I'm not a Zionist, wrongly equate. And in some ways, I kind of am a Zionist. I don't like to say that because I do want there to be frank, I guess I do kind of want there to be a state of Israel, but I don't want it to be a Jewish state. I want it to be a state where all religions are treated fairly, justly, equal rights, equal citizenship, where victims of discrimination anywhere are free to go and feel safe. That's what I want. Probably shouldn't be called Israel. It's probably not being a Zionist, as the term is generally understood. The rest of this letter that I also just wanted to highlight, that I didn't highlight literally with yellow, but I found frustrating. I should emphasize, this is in the letter, that our programs have never discriminated against people based on their identity. Indeed, we prohibit such discrimination. So I I just can't agree with that statement because I know for a fact that at Wesleyan, that certain groups of people, based on their identity, had to get higher scores to get accepted. That if you were an individual member of a particular group, you needed higher SAT scores and a higher GPA to be accepted. And if you were a member of a different group, you might need a lower SAT score and a lower GPA to be admitted. So the argument that there's no discrimination, I think, fails based on that fact. Now, do I think, isn't that discrimination? If we have different standards for an individual because of their identity, isn't that discrimination? I don't know. Maybe you don't think it is. I'm not saying there might not be just cause for that. I really wanted Arlen, to get into. I want to get into that a little bit with Arlen yesterday because I think it's a very, very difficult, very thorny issue. But I don't think the school should say we don't discriminate based on identity when their standards are different for admission based on identity. I think that's where I have a problem with that statement. Now, you might have good reason for doing it. You might say, well, we're doing this because it leads to better outcomes for society. And then we can debate whether that's accurate. But I think that was an untrue statement. Okay, just really want to highlight this in case anyone may be there who's watching this video. Hey, if you are going to be at the organizing conference this weekend in Seattle, put it in the discussion, right? Put a little comment. I hope I see at least one because I will be there. And if you're there, just look for me Saturday in Seattle. I'm really looking forward to this. I know I've been criticized in the past for flying, and I don't really like to fly, and I don't really want to fly, and I understand it's bad for the environment, but this was an opportunity that came up for me to go to this event, and I just decided I want to go. And it's open to the public, so anyone can go, but just the price was right. It was very low plane fare, and so I'm going to be there, Seattle, this weekend. I hope you can make it. If you can, just let me know. 240-242-5646. You have to register if you haven't yet. And Jill Stein's presence is a big reason. Also, I'm getting more involved in my local Green Party. Excited about that as well. I want to get into this discussion of what Democrats need to do to win. And I cannot stress how important it is to justify and provide a vision for an argument for voting for Democrats. It isn't enough. You cannot beat something with nothing. Trump, MAGA is something. You may not like it. You may find it horrific, but it's something. The Democrats have to provide something else, an alternative. And I'm showing this, and I'm not going to show the whole back and forth, but this is so emblematic of the response by so many anti-MAGA, anti-Republicans, that Trump was so bad, horrible, and his voters, they're gullible fools. A ton didn't vote at all, and the rest of us have to watch the worst episode. So it's the voters' fault. And my whole point was, wait a second, if you're going to say the voters did this terrible, terrible thing, if you're going to argue that the problem is an ignorant, an uninformed electorate, or a selfish or whatever electorate, or a befuddled electorate, if you're going to make that argument, you have to show that there was a better choice, a better alternative. And I'm saying, yeah, there was a better alternative. That better alternative's name is Jill Stein and Butch Ware, and that's who people should have voted for. But to say that they should have voted for Kamala, no. you have to make an argument that she would have been better. Or at a minimum, that Trump was much worse. And we've already seen Trump's cutting or proposing cuts to the military budget. Trump is reaching out to Putin. They are meeting. Trump has told NATO they need to spend more money on their own defense because we ain't going to do it. There is right now a ceasefire. Is it perfect? No. Do I like Trump's rhetoric with regard to Palestine? No. But bombs aren't falling on the Palestinian people. So, or at least the people in Gaza. So if you're going to say that you couldn't possibly have voted for Trump because he was so bad, you run into the facts that at least in certain areas, Trump isn't bad, is doing the right thing. So again, why, given Harris's support for genocide, given Harris's support for the fossil fuel industry, why are you so hell-bent on insulting and attacking Trump voters? It's going to turn people off, and they're not going to support your candidates. They're going to be pissed off about it. And B, it's not even accurate. So why are you doing it? And so I made that point. I said, okay, you think Trump's so bad. You think Harris is so much better. Why? Why? What's the evidence for that? Present it. Like, remember, I had this debate with Arlen. Is Trump the worst president of all time? Well, he's not. And here's why not. Abu Ghraib, George W. Bush, right there. Right? Plenty of other examples. Kent State, Vietnam, the Trail of Tears. If you're going to say Trump's the worst president of all time, you got to reckon with those horrific things that U.S. presidents have done and show why he's worse. And if you're going to say, well, you had to vote for Harris, so therefore his voters are stupid and ignorant and dumb, well, why? Why'd you have to vote for her? What did she do that was so great? And I make that point. Your argument, because if you can't make the argument, then we've got to go to the Green Party, right? If you have two unacceptably bad choices, and clearly we did, I believe, then we have to go to a third, plan C. Or plan B or whatever it is. Because plan A, the Democrats, is a failure. Plan B, the Republicans, no. So plan C, plan G for green. So I say your argument here, as I understand, is that Kamala's not as evil as Trump. So you had to vote for her to stop him, right? That's the argument. But I said no. Look at what Kamala's done. She was all in for genocide. She wanted to make the U.S. the most lethal military the world has ever seen. She supported fracking when we're in the midst of the sixth great extinction caused by humans burning fossil fuels. So she's terrible too, right? So if you disagree, if I'm missing something, what is it that I'm missing? And the response, as it always is, Trump bad, Trump worse. You want to still try to make it, everyone believe that Biden and Harris really hated Palestinians. So they wanted them all dead. And their land is... No, I don't, where did you get that from? That's just complete fabrication. It's a straw person argument. It's not that they hated Palestinians. I don't know what they think about Palestinians. Their policies led to all those Palestinians being killed. It was the policies that they pursued. That's what matters. And I go back and I say, because that was the response to my question, what was good about Harris? And if you want people to vote for Democrats, you have to identify good things that Democrats do. And if you can't, then abandon that argument. Abandon that. Abandon the Democrats. If you can't come up with good things, because you can't beat something with nothing, you can't beat MAGA with nothing. So my response, facts that demonstrate decency and good policies from her shouldn't be so hard to find. And I use Bernie as an example. And I don't love Bernie. I have problems with Bernie. I don't think Bernie's so great. But yeah, here's some good things. They're pretty clear too. Champions Medicare for all. Wants to cut military budgets. Supports higher tax on billionaires. Where's the list for Kamala? Yeah, she did talk a little bit about raising taxes, and it was on the margins, and it's not going to be above this, and she peeled back what she was going to do, and it was just as least far she could possibly go, and still be a populist, sort of, and still claim that she was against the billionaire class. And there was nothing. There was no list. That was my last. That was the last comment. When I said, "What has she done that you like? What are the policies that she championed that you support?" Nothing. I'll give you another example. I saw this. It was exactly the same argument. This is from a Democratic, I believe, member, party employee. So I was really interested. It is International Darwin Day. What do you think we should do to celebrate? That was February 12th. And I looked at this and I was going to talk about it, but I never got a chance. I want to bring it up now because, again, this is about what can we do to defeat. You want to defeat Trump. You don't want our government, which can be, hasn't been recently, but could and should be a force for good to make life better for people. So how do we get there? And support, by the way, the reality, the fact of evolution, right? That all life pretty much started from one cell at the bottom of the ocean somewhere. And when I say pretty much is maybe there were more than one. Maybe there probably have been more than one creation in the history of the earth. And it may well be, we don't know. No one really knows. I've heard some speculation that maybe there were separate one-cell creatures that, formed. And who knows how that ever happened, right? I sure as heck don't. That's why I'm not an atheist. I'm a skeptic. Because to me, the idea that first there was nothing, there was just barrenness, there was just a void, and then there's masses. There's rocks, and there's water, and there's air, and then there's life. I don't care if that takes 1 billion years, or if it happens when some creature in the sky clicks their fingers. Both of those are so astonishing to me, so amazing, that I can't say, okay, there's no such thing as God, that everything is physics. Every single thing is physics. But physics still can't explain why there's mass, why there's energy in the first place. Where did that come from? So I will not call myself an atheist. Here's my answer to the question, how we should celebrate International Darwin Day, which, by the way, I don't think anyone even knew was a thing, but okay. Okay, it's a thing. So my answer is commit to supporting political candidates and parties that will end our dependence on fossil fuels and our embrace of endless war before what biodiversity we still have is gone, like the buffalo and the dodo bird, right? Because we humans extinguished the dodo bird and pretty much extinguished the American bison. Certainly those massive herds, those thundering herds, the millions, I believe, of bison that roam the plains, they're all gone. And in the end, what's killing so many other species is fossil fuel consumption. It's not the only thing, also loss of habitat, but they go hand in hand. One reason that we're able to inhabit more and more of the earth is because of fossil fuels, because we're not all huddled together in small groups. So you want to celebrate International Darwin Day, commit to supporting political candidates and parties that will end our dependence on fossil fuels and endless war. And by the way, that's neither political party, neither major political party. So I posed this. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? I mean, there isn't really how could there even be a dispute about this, right? I mean, this seems so clearly the case. And I know my screen looks a little funny. Sorry, folks, that's my bad. And so the response was, I agree. Too bad we have a person as opposed. So, right, they immediately turn it against Trump, right? My point is we need candidates, we need electeds who champion clean, green energy and an end to war, which is not Harris, which is not Trump, although Trump on war seems to be a little better. Too bad we have the person as opposed that we have now. He has zero disregard for biodiversity. I think they meant zero regard. And I wrote, so my response was fine. You want to beat up Trump. You're clearly you're briefing the case for voting for, I guess, Democrats. Who in the opposition party meets my criteria, which she agreed with? They agreed with. Well, and then the answer is, well, if Harris had been elected, we'd be in a better position. Why? Why would we be in a better position? Where? What evidence do you have to support that? It's sort of like there's anti-Semitism. There's a surge in anti-Semitism. Why do you say that? And there's no why. There's no answer to that. There's no answer. Wow. So I thought I was only going to go an hour, less than an hour, and I've already gone over the hour. I wanted to talk a little bit about John Ossoff and how he's getting attacked for doing the right thing. I may have mentioned this yesterday with Arlen. I'm not sure, but I had a little segment of the newspaper to put in, but we're there. We're at the end of the program. So I will be back tomorrow, probably late. We won't have the noon start time. I'm looking to go down to the Hill to actually lobby for peace in Ukraine, for an end to our proxy war with Russia. So that's where I should be tomorrow during the normal start time of noon. But I'll be back at some point in the afternoon and do the show. See you tomorrow and have a great afternoon. I wonder why I'm not getting my... I know what the problem... Yeah, so just there's your exit music.